expertise in the room is far greater than the expertise of any individual attending. So let's share that. So, Ron.
Okay, welcome everybody. I put a link in the text chat to direct to the page where you registered, and the registration form is still live there at the top if you're seeing my shared screen. Can I just get you to confirm there in my share screen?
Yep.
And what we add these days to the project is just a summary at the top. So welcome to Self-Assessment Mastery Learning. A little bit about us if you want to access that afterwards, and then a panel for each of our guest speakers. So we've now changed the order, so Esam is going to go first, or Lillian's going to go first, and then Esam, and hopefully Stefan will join us. And then there's another little panel, what next? Everything else on this page are the resources and recordings for the previous running of this topic. So we started the funded project many years ago now. And so all the recordings and the resources and text chat and so on are all available. And this is obviously just the page for self-assessment. If you go back to the homepage and look at the menu, there's all of the previous topics and all the future topics that we're going to rerun available there. So a rich resource that we spent many years developing and sharing, and the community have contributed to. So what we're doing in these reflected sessions is just reflected more and picking up on some things that haven't been covered or have matured or changed, as well as new speakers and so on. We are recording the session, so keep that in mind, and we make the recording available as soon as possible after the session, probably early next week. So you're going to start off, Lillian?
Yeah, I was going to say the kind of things that people said they were interested in learning by attending this session. Something Esam will probably be interested in, to know what the participants want to learn. It was quite generic this time around. I guess self-assessment is quite an interesting topic in higher education, isn't it? But good practice using quizzes for learning tools, the impact of self-assessment, novel methods for self-assessment, students creating knowledge check quizzes, maybe a bit of discussion around that, effectiveness of that, and ways to help students to get more out of formative quizzes. So those are the kind of key things that people wanted to find out about in this session. So I am just going to do a little bit of a cover for Stefan, who's not turned up, but just to cover off a little something that I've been doing in my practice with students, that I have been using Menti a lot more. And this was something that Stefan had wanted to kind of get across, that I think nearly 3 years ago, when Stefan presented on this particular topic, he was using a lot of quizzes within the VLE for students, self-access, and then using things like the VLE quizzes and Xerte quizzes and things like that. And what he's finding, he's doing a lot more, rather than expecting students to do the quizzes outside of class hours. He's finding that people are enjoying doing the quizzing a lot more in class, if you like. So while they're actually there and seeing the results, cumulative results, and learning from that together. So gamifying it a little bit. So yes, self-assessment, but in a much more social constructivist way. So one thing that I've been interested in, because of one of our speakers from a previous webinar talking about this idea of longitudinal collaboration. So this idea of seeing across different stages, year 1, year 2, year 3, and that kind of thing. So this year for induction, I was able to kind of poll stage 2 students first about their learning strategy. So basically, I wanted them to really think about what worked for them in year 1 and what they were going to do differently in year 2. And then I took this information and I brought it across to the year 1 induction. And you can see how I will be weaving this across from one year to the next, to try and give people that sense of learning from others who have gone before. I have edited this a little bit. You can imagine when you give students something like open text options. I think one of the first answers was a little bit rude, but you know, I think one of the other answers that appeared quite a lot was cry. So this was quite interesting because it's making them reflect. So didn't have, for instance, one student said, I didn't have a successful learning strategy. I panicked and did everything at the last second. So doing this kind of understanding at the beginning of a year may make them a little bit more determined to have a different strategy. Also seeing what others have said. Others have said they attended seminars, they discussed ideas in seminars, they had good time management, they kept up as much as possible. All this is stuff that can kind of set the tone for how they're going to operate as the year progresses. Then going on to this, what do you plan to do differently in year 2? A little bit of humor there. Cry was one of the popular plans. But apart from that, you know, other people are being a bit more succinct, aren't they? Rather than saying about the strategy, what they're going to do differently, they're going to try hard. Not specific enough. Maybe they're not being specific enough. Some people are kind of saying, do reading earlier, do my readings ahead of time, but try harder isn't a better plan. So from this information, the students have kind of are able to see each other's responses. But as the tutor in the front, if you like, I can see that we have some work to do to help students to create effective plans. So I think one thing that's good with this form of self-assessment compared to, if you like, quizzes where they're just self-marked, is that you have a chance to kind of learn something from the students' responses. And very possibly that will happen when you create self-assessment quizzes as well. If you bother to look at the answers that the students have picked, you may be able to draw some conclusions on how ready they were to kind of take a quiz to understand that particular knowledge. But when you're doing kind of slightly more open-ended self-assessment quizzes, there's a lot of opportunity for us to learn as tutors from the answers that the students give. So I would kind of say that's the difference in self-assessment, where in the past I would have focused on telling colleagues to build up banks of self-test quizzes. I am more willing to kind of say, how about including 1 or 2 open-ended quizzes at the end of a lecture as self-assessment from the students, but then it also informs everybody at the same time on where students are at in their thinking.
That's a very nice segue actually into some of the work that Esam's going to be talking to us about, where Esam's got examples of both of those that he's using. Esam, thank you very much for that, Lillian, and I think that gives us a very nice run in. I'll just see whether or not Esam's ready. Are you ready now, Esam?
I think so.
Okay,
Yeah.
Then you've got 12 minutes and maybe even longer, but we'll aim for 12 minutes
Okay.
to look at those 2 areas you are going to cover. Do you want to get your screen shared with us, and we'll
Yep.
tell you that's working? I can see that now, so fire away.
All right. Thank you very much. So I don't have long, so it's going to be a really fast session. And what I'm going to be covering is self-assessment quizzes in Microsoft Forms and also how to create collaborative group work using Microsoft Teams for assignments. So there are pros and cons to all of these different type of quiz platforms, but one of my favorites is Microsoft Forms, and it's probably not the most exciting one. It doesn't compare to Kahoot or Quizzes, but it does a lot of the heavy lifting. And one of the biggest benefits of Microsoft Forms is that it's a single sign-on and it works seamlessly within the Microsoft Teams assignment. And one way that I started using it a few years ago in order to reduce my workload and get the students to do more of the work and put the onus on them is to create these things called self-assessment quizzes. So as you can see in Microsoft Forms, we have one that was created, I think, a few years ago. And if we look at the questions here, so I'm just going to go to the questions and click on preview. And it's a really simple self-assessment quiz. And it's got this thing called branching, which is a concept taken from e-learning. And I guess the word comes from the branches in trees, that if you answer one question one way, it takes you to a different path. So as you can see with this quiz, I just ask my students really simple questions. Have you done this? Have you not done this? And because it's got this branching integrated within it, and it's very easy to do Microsoft Forms, if they answer yes, it goes to this question. If they answer no, it goes to a sort of a date input where they have to say, I will complete by. If they click on yes, it goes to another question. If they click on no, it goes back to that date input form. So it's just a series of questions. And then at the end, I think they have to then just put a comment. And the idea for them is, as I said, the idea is to put the onus on the learners for them to take responsibility for their own learning. And once they complete this, you get this comment. Once they complete this, what I get in the back end is really interesting. I get this in the back end. So it gives me a really quick snapshot of where my learners are. So I can see that 22 of them have completed. Let me zoom in so you can see this better. Whoops. 22 of them have completed, you know, their social media pages, and 3 of them said they will complete this by. So when I click on more details, which I won't, but I'll give you an idea because of GDPR, I'll give you an idea because I blurred this for you. What you get here is that when you click on more details, is you get the students' names. And then on the right, you can see their responses. And those ones that have said no, then will create their own, you know, smart target within OneNote, by the way. And then what they'll do is we'll use the lesson as a workshop for them to complete all of those, you know, areas which they identified as incomplete. So I found this works really, really well, and it just automates some of that sort of tedious, you know, monitoring of where my students are. So I do this quite a lot, and that's the idea behind these self-assessment quizzes. And of course, I'm not going to do that now, but you can export this to a spreadsheet, which I do a lot. And then that way I can just get an overview of where everyone is, and then just go and, you know, poke them and say, you need to do this and you need to do that. And then depending where we are in the year, if it's towards the end of the year, that's what we do probably every week, and I'll see progress. So that's the idea behind self-assessment quizzes. Now, the next thing that I do want to show you is this idea of, and I think it's so good. So let's exit this. Whoops, let's exit this and open up one of my dummy accounts. That's right. Yep. So we have a team over here, and as a teacher, you can, I'll divide my my class into groups, and it's quite hard to do that. So what we do is we use Microsoft Teams to do that, and it automates some of this process. So if I just go to assignments over here, and I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Microsoft Teams and assignment, but we made the full transition from our previous VLE to Microsoft Teams as our digital learning platform. And this is what we rely on. We don't have a VLE anymore. So, you know, we've had to take advantage of all the different features within Teams in order to reach that, you know, near parity with a VLE. So with this idea in terms of creating group work and getting the students to co-author or co-create their quizzes, what I do is this. So I go and create an assignment over here, and I'll click on create, and I'll click on assignment, right? Really easy. For those that know Microsoft Teams, that's a really easy concept. So what I'll do, for example, say, you know, I've taught, I don't know, HTML, right? So what I'll do is after maybe 4 weeks, I will go through this process. I won't add a category for now, but where the trick here is over here. So normally teachers will just click on all students, but what I do is I click on all students, and there's a new feature that they introduced, I think about 1.5 years ago. And it's this feature that allows you to create assignments for groups. It's a wonderful feature, it really is. So I'm just going to click here on groups of students. And what you can do is you can manually group the students, or you can randomly group them. So I'm just going to click on randomly group students over here. And it tells me, it asks me, how many groups do you want? So over here, I'll just say 4, and it does the maths for me. So with 4 groups, I get 3 students, obviously depending on how many students we have in this team. So I'm just going to click on create the groups. It's done it. As you can see, let me zoom in just to show you. These are dummy students, by the way, it's a dummy tenant. So over here, you can see it's grouped them automatically for me randomly. So if I know that Alex and Ashley are troublemakers and I don't want them to be in that particular group, I'll just click on this icon over here. I can delete and I can add other students, right? So it does some really good stuff over there, and I just click on done, right? As easy as that. So it's telling me I've got these 4 groups now, right? And say it's HTML, I don't know, lesson 1. Let's just make some things up. So what I would do here, because there are 4 groups, then I would switch to Microsoft Forms. So it's as easy as just going to forms, right? Forms over here, new quiz, right? And I'll just click on group 3 over here. I haven't done anything, but what I want to do is I want to make this form a collaborative quiz. So it means that if I share this link with anyone, they'll be able to collaborate on this quiz, just like you would normally with a collaborative Word document or a Google Doc. So to do that, you just create a form, obviously without questions, because I want my students to do the questions. And basically where it says the ellipsis, the 3 dots, what I will do is I will click on collaborate or duplicate, right? And what I want them to do is I want them to collaborate. So I say, get a link to view and edit. So it generates this link for me. So I'm just going to click on copy, correct? And I'm going to go back in here. And this is what I normally do. So I'll say group 1, just to make my life easier. So group 1, right? I'll put the link in there because this is group 3. There we go. We've got that link in there. I could have, of course, made it a shorter link if I wanted to. So, oh, actually, in this one, it doesn't give us the ability to shorten the link. So I'll just go back and show you one more group. Where's the other group? Group 2. There we go. So all you need to do is click on those 3 dots, collaborate and duplicate, get a link to view and edit, copy that. You go back to your assignments. That's group 2. Right, there you go. Let's just finish this off because I've got a student account which I'll show you on their end. Right, so let's do that one more time. New quiz. Group 4. Let me know how I'm doing with time, Alistair, because I am conscious of that. So
I'm you're doing well. I'm being a little generous on this. I'm happy to give you another 2-3 minutes.
okay, yep. All right, thank
Yep,
you.
yep.
So that's group 4. And then we have our final group, which is group 1. Where is that? Group 4, group. Nope. Thought I had it. Doesn't matter. New quiz. Group 1. Right, there we go. 3 dots. Collaborate, duplicate, get a link, copy that, go back to the assignments. Finally, we're done. So basically, that's what would happen over here. So we're all ready. We can put that in the calendar. We can put, you know, a due date and the rest, and we just click on assign. As easy as that, right? So once we click on assign, the students on their end will get, he says, will get a notification. And I think that was physical science, wasn't it? So this is a student's account over here. So let's see if this works. All right, I think that was physical science. Yeah, beautiful. So you can see over here, Bruno, who's the teacher, has created an assignment, right? And there's the assignment over here. So this is from the student's perspective. So as a student, this student in particular has been added to group 3. Can you see that?
Mm.
So that's group 3, and I can click on the 3 students and I can see who those students are. Obviously, I would guide them at this stage and say, make sure that you click on that particular link. So here's group 3. They click on that link. And of course, it's refused to connect. But essentially, what would happen, maybe because it's just brand new, what would happen is that they would get that link essentially like this, essentially. And that would what they would do is then they would go and click, you know, what, for example, I'll show them the different types of questions, of course, and then I'll say, okay, you need to create at least 10 questions that are related to what we've learned in the last 4 weeks. So this is obviously a really effective form of retrieval practice. So I'll say, what does HTML, not me, the student, for? What does HTML stand for? And then here they'll have to put the answer. And then I'll probably get them to, oops, let me just cheat on that. Hypertext markup language. All right, and then I'll probably ask them to make variations of that. Oops. In terms of maybe a hyphen there. It's a required. So the students will come up with the questions. And the idea is that they're co-authoring and co-creating these questions. So they have to come up with the questions and they have to come up with the answers. And I think this is such an effective way to get the students to think about some really good questions and answers. And I think, to me, it's a fantastic way in terms of retrieval practice. And as you saw from my title of this, you know, presentation, is, with some tongue-in-cheek, by the way, why are you doing all the work?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
When you can get the students to do all the work, and when they do more of the work, they're doing more of the learning. And what you're doing is, obviously, we've heard this idea of we're just facilitating the learning. And obviously, we have to check on the quality of those questions and answers. So once they've done 10 questions, then what they do is they share these questions. They share these questions with each other. So not the questions, sorry, the quizzes. They share it with each other in teams, and then they get to answer each other's questions. And that is, in a nutshell, how I use Microsoft Forms and the groups feature within the team's assignment to reduce my workload, because it's really, really important. But more importantly, to improve, you know, the learning outcomes, I believe, of my learners.
That's fantastic, Isam. Thank you very much for that. And there's been lots of questions in the chat, and I think some comments. People saying, "Oh, I think you could probably do that in this tool as well," which is fantastic because Isam's not here just to talk to you about forms. Although if you are using forms, you can see there's a really good integration. But it's also about those ideas about getting students taking the agency and the ownership for developing their own understanding. So that's brilliant, Isam. Thank you very much for that.
That's excellent. Alistair, just one more point,
Yep.
because Lillian just put a fantastic link, and she just found a rubric for marking quizzes that students create,
Yep.
which is what you see in front of you, which is absolutely fantastic. So just to take that idea even one step further, can you see this HTML lesson 1? So if I go back to edit the assignment, what you can do here is you can actually attach a rubric.
Oh, right.
So you can now mark, the quality of those quizzes. So thank you very much, Leon. That's a fantastic link over there.
So
No,
there's
thank you, Isam. I think that's been a really fabulous, stimulating example of sometimes we take for granted the tools that we have and we use them to create stuff. And it's really nice to have that reminder that when we flip it and we make the students create, we get another level of engagement and learning from our learners. So yeah, thank you very much for that. There were some questions which maybe we'll come to when we've had our second speaker. If you're all right to stay on,
Absolutely,
Isam.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
That'll be absolutely brilliant. Teresa, would you care to introduce Stefan? I think, and hopefully, Stefan, you feel ready to share and present as well.
Yep. Yep,
Sure.
I'm ready.
Oh, great. Thank you, Stefan. Lovely to have you with us. So just to read actually what's on our Xerti resource about Stefan. I know he works at York. I know he's presented for Future Teacher before, so we've invited him back as part of this reflection session on self-assessment and mastery learning. So his session will explore how quality contact time can be maximised to facilitate student development while streamlining the administrative and content learning tasks, which can take time away from critical thinking. So Stefan has a teaching background specialising in teaching and assessing international and second language students, so very close to my heart too. As well as leading the learning of teachers internationally. Formative assessment has been central to facilitating learning, ensuring progression and student development has been achieved. Thank you, Stefan. Over to you.
Hi. Yep. Apologies. Mastery learning and self-assessment. One of the key things that I've learned is I need to make sure that everything is in my diary. Now, as has been explained, just looking at mastery learning and how technology can basically help to ensure that teachers have got the maximum amount of time to be able to help develop the students, and students have got the time to be able to learn the things that they need to and then use the learning in class in order to be able to develop the skills and get the help that they need. So when we're looking about self-assessment.
Sorry, Stefan, can I just interrupt very briefly? It's Alistair here. I just need to ask Isam, you're still sharing your screen. If you could just switch off your screen share for the minute, that'd be great. And then if Stefan's showing us anything, we'll see that. There'll also be a little bird bell ringing halfway through, and then another one a minute before the end.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so self-assessment, two of the main things that I'm going to be talking about is Mentimeter and Google Forms. These are my two go-to tools. Students like them and they each fulfill a different purpose. Now, when we talk about self-assessment, self-assessment isn't a new thing, and very briefly, one of the original basic self-assessments, flashcards, traffic lights, exit cards, these type of things are static and imprecise. They allow a very quick visual representation, but don't really allow anybody to find out any qualitative details. These obviously have been developed into peer assessments where you've got peer marking in journals, but this places too much emphasis on the student understanding and opportunities for any misunderstanding to develop. So through COVID in particular, but beforehand, we obviously needed to do self-assessment, and we needed to ensure that students were able to access and understand the information that we needed to get across. Now, originally that would have been in the form of a lecture where I could see what students were thinking to an extent and be able to ask questions to check understanding. But even so, that would only be to 1 or 2 students. So 2 tools that I started using were Mentimeter, which allows for students to watch lectures, understand lectures, which by this time were pre-recorded. However, that relies on students actually being forced to watch lectures, which I don't know about any of you guys, but when I was a student, lectures weren't the most important thing. So online, even less so. Mentimeter is used in conjunction with the recorded lectures. Students watch the lectures, and I am then able to gauge the students' understanding through the activities that the students participate in Mentimeter. Those of you who've used it, it's fast-paced and competitive. If it needs to be, it can also be done at a student's own pace. So when it is being done as a self-reflective tool, as in when students are using it in their own time, it can be used for students to be able to find the right answers and give answers which are both qualitative and quantitative. Really useful. This then allows the teacher to understand what the students are able to gather, what students haven't understood, and it also allows the teacher to be able to see how many times the student has accessed Mentimeter to be able to develop their own learning. When Mentimeter is used in seminar classes, then this is where the fast-paced and competitive aspect comes in. For my students in particular, which are international, the idea of putting your hand up and offering a suggestion isn't really what students like to do. Whereas Mentimeter allows every student to give their initial thoughts in a safe and anonymous manner. So, and there's also the competitive aspect. Everybody wants to be able to get the highest score, which again, plays into the international strengths, or teaching international strengths. So not only am I as a teacher able to gauge the understanding of the students, but it also allows me to gather whole class data about student understanding, useful for reports. For example, I've got actual quantitative data that I can put on as to how a student has engaged, what level of progress a student has made. This is one of the benefits for the teacher. The benefit for the student is that it's possible to provide links to the correct answers or to the resources which will give justification to an answer. So not only do students get to participate in a quiz, but they also get the right information at the end. One of the other things that I use is Google Forms. Again, this is brilliant for evidence of learning. It's really easy to set up. Once the forms are set up, you are then able to use it year on year with minimal, with updates to any questions or tasks that you might want to change, but the basic element is there already. It saves a massive amount of time on preparation. It's also easy just to copy over the locations from the Google Forms into your next year's folders, so you can have detailed breakdowns of which questions student answered, what the answers were, and it works in a similar fashion to Mentimeter. I think it's brilliant for checking on flipped learning. It means that I can check exactly what the students understand before class, and then it means that I know, do I need to reteach something? Is there something which hasn't worked in my presentation? If something hasn't worked in the presentation, I'll need to go over it with the students. If the majority of students have got the right answers or the right ideas to the questions, it literally means I can go straight into the more higher skills needed in the classroom. So the analysis aspect, the evaluation aspect, knowing that my students understand the basic elements needed for the analysis and assessment. One of the biggest advantages for me is that it might not create the report, but it gives data for reports to be used. There is absolutely no marking necessary because it will self-mark, and when students give the wrong answers, it will give students the locations of where the right answers can be found. If it is an open-ended question where you can't really gauge the right or wrong element of the answer, you can anonymize them and put the answers on screen. So every student's answer can be shared on screen. However, the names aren't attached to the work. So students understand that their answer is somewhere in there, but there isn't the level of fear of having their understanding shown on screen. You can then highlight very easily differences between answers, pointing out where the answers are better or where they need developing. This isn't just something that the tutor can do, it's something students do by themselves as well. So you'd put the answers for question 3 up, and the students would then look at them, decide which are the better answers, why the answers are better than the other. And as it's anonymous, I've found that there is an awful lot of take up for this in class. The other benefits are where it is a quantitative presentation, students can use these Google Forms multiple times. Really useful for cramming before exams or for helping each other to have the question sets and the answers there. Whereas if you question on paper, like we did quite often pre-pandemic, students lose the information, filing systems aren't quite as good as they could be. So it makes sure that students have got easy access to all of the learning that they need, the exemplar answers that you provide. And it can also be linked to the marking principles. So the value is huge for students, especially for international second language, less confident students, or even those who are more studious. You've got the revision aids, a resource bank, you don't lose the notes, and importantly, you can check progress as a student by comparing the answers that you gave at the beginning of the year or semester and the answers that you gave towards the end of the course. For the teachers, and this is what I'm particularly interested in, it cuts down on the amount of marking, something that I'm sure many people have less positive thoughts about. It improves my understanding of the classroom dynamics and the ability to understand the metrics that I need to create reports. It informs me whether my teaching and input is appropriate and actually meets the purpose, due to the fact that I have quantifiable data to justify why I am changing a course or why I am sticking with what I've done previously. More importantly, it releases time within seminar for higher level class-based activities and is great for highlighting the learning journey as evidence for supporting those students who are less confident. It's really easy to point out, well, look at where you were at the beginning. Your answers weren't particularly great, but by the end of the course, as you've progressed in confidence, you have made great strides and you've got this evidence. So I apologize for not having the PowerPoint, but that essentially is why I absolutely love using electronic tools for self-assessment, why it gives value to both the student and the teacher. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stefan.
Stefan, certainly as a language educator, I recognise your comments there about marking and how self-assessment quizzes can reduce that and help focus teacher time on something a little bit more directed and useful. Thank you very much.
Apologies, I didn't have the PowerPoint ready.
No worries. No worries, we got there. Thank you. Good to have you here with us. And I'm sure, because there are lots of queries and questions that have arisen in the chat, there's lots of potential discussion that we can come back to. And there are, I'm going to defer to Lillian here on how you want to manage the next bit.
Oh, there were some questions for our speakers. So
Yes.
if Esam's around, I'm going to direct these questions to Esam, and where relevant, you know, Stefan, please feel free to reply as well. One question for Esam was, did you find that if the forms were not anonymous, there was an impact on engagement? So, you know, I would have thought if students were collaboratively working on a quiz, they needed to be signed in members for them to work on that.
Hi, yeah, so that's one of the benefits of Microsoft Forms and the Microsoft 365 suite is this single sign-on. As I said previously, there's some pros and cons to everything, but with Microsoft Forms, one of the biggest advantages is they have to sign in with their account, so I know that, you know, who's logged in and who's not. That's the advantage of using it over other tools, the single sign-on process.
Yeah, and I think this question about whether it's easy for the students to go back and see, I think it's data rather than
No,
dates.
it was the calendar. So when a student's, that's what I think Beth was getting at there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, but you said that if they said, no, I haven't done this, they could click on a calendar and select the date they would do it by. The question was, can they get back? Have they got a record that they said, oh yeah, I said I was going to do this by Friday, or is it kind of just lost in the ether?
No, they have. So they've got the ability to print their summaries and have the results emailed to themselves too.
Okay.
And then someone, sorry, I forgot to take down the names as well. Do you have an institutional policy on archiving all this Teams work?
That's a really good question. So basically what I did is, as an e-learning manager, and that's part of my role at the college, is that I just created a video and asked all the teachers to archive their team. So we don't have an automated process in place yet. So each teacher is now responsible for archiving their previous teams. So I created a screencast just showing them how to go through the steps, but that's where we are now. No automated process yet. And there's no document that says, you know, you have to do it. No, unfortunately, no.
Yeah. Okay. And then
if I could just interrupt a second, Lillian, just looking at some of the interactions that we're having in the chat here, that whole plus or minus on single sign-on and anonymity and this whole sort of area, and it was one that I've certainly battled with in the past with students, and I came to the conclusion that actually the most important part from a practitioner perspective is transparency, that students would know that, yes, if you do the quizzes, I am collecting, you know, I will be able to see how you got on, and I will use that in order to inform my teaching. But you know, that is all I'm using it for, to make things better for you, not to steal information and sell it anywhere, and not for any sort of nefarious process that means you'll be embarrassed by in front of your peers. But I do think there are arguments for some use or choice of a degree of anonymity in participation to some of these quizzes, which of course things like Quizlet and Mentimeter do give you that possibility. So transparency, I think, really would be my key word here. That
yeah, can I add to that? So yeah, so basically with regards to the self-assessment, I think as a teacher that works in FE, the majority of my learners are 16 to 18-year-olds, it's important that I see who's completed what and who hasn't, because part of my role is actually to motivate learners and push them in the right direction. So I guess if it was adults, it'd be a different ball game, but considering these are 16 to 18-year-olds, I think I'd rather go through the route where I can see names and progress.
yeah, completely register that. And it's all about really having a rationale, isn't it? And making sure that, as I say, people understand where you're coming from.
Just in case you missed it in the chat, Isam, there's a couple of comments there from Phil and Cesar about setting up a Power Automate flow, which is something you'd understand a lot more than me, but that would automatically add dates that they selected on the quiz to their calendar. Sorry, on their responses to your thing.
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
That's a conversation for you to carry on. That would sound amazing, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, Emma, that's a virtual background of my side business. It's a virtual one, and I superimposed the logo and the mission statement there.
Now there was quite a lot of reference to hot potatoes in some of the discussion. I think some warm memories of that. I don't know, is anybody using hot potatoes, any version of hot potatoes at the moment? And if so, is it something where you've had a chance to kind of explore the accessibility elements? Because accessibility and inclusion are, quite important. These self-assessment tools are fantastic at building up and including people's confidence, building up confidence for people with mental health issues, people with anxiety, people with short-term memory issues, executive function, all those sorts of things. Being able to test yourself after the lecture, being able to, or before the lecture, as Stefan was saying, being able to test yourself, get a sense of, I do understand this, etc. That's really important for inclusion. But if the actual tool itself doesn't let you change the text size or the background color, or won't work with text-to-speech or screen readers, then you have a different exclusion problem. So I don't know if anyone has experiences in those areas, or would like to tell us about what they're doing, or any students they've got there. Anything?
I think we're indulging in a little tech nostalgia, to be honest. Those of us who are older, at least.
Yeah, and I think that was it. I think it's the fact that hot potatoes at the time, with Web 2.0 coming on the scene, it was the first of those tools that helped people to feel like they could create
things,
something. Yeah, so
without
that's
skills.
why we're still quite focused on it. But since then, we've got, I remember I used Kia. I loved it. I think it's still alive and kicking. But it's the appropriateness of a tool for your audience right now, right? So, for instance, would I create a Kia quiz for my higher education students? Maybe not so, which is another reason why higher education doesn't use Kahoot as much as it uses Menti. It's just the look and feel is a little bit more adult or more up to date. So I guess, all these little things make a difference nowadays to whether your Gen Z students find it kind of, it's not that we're trying to be cool for our students, but you don't want them to think you're using a Mickey Mouse tool. You want to look professional.
Could Ron say a little bit about, Ron's got a lovely comment in there, forget Hotpot, use Xerte instead. Do you want to say a little bit about Xerte and about the, because not everybody here will necessarily know Xerte, and about some of the accessibility work that you developers have put into that?
Yeah, it's a good point, Alistair. And also I'd put a question about what other types of self-assessment activities people create or get their students to create other than quizzes and multiple choice and polls, because I kind of think that that's where the label goes, self-assessment of those things, rather than the myriad of all the other types of self-assessment that can be far more powerful and far more rewarding for the students, whether they're using them to learn from or whether they're actually creating them. And Xerte is a free and open source tool that lots of institutions use that can do both those things. So historically, it's an e-learning authoring tool that people create resources with, and often that's the staff, the teachers and the academics. But actually more and more, they've followed the same route as ESAM, that what they do is set a brief and the students are creating those learning resources and including interactive pages in those learning resources. So I put a link to a section of a demonstrator of Xerte that basically is, there's the fuller resource, but that's the beginning of the examples of the different interaction pages that are available. And I know Lillian recently has done some work with the escape room type functionality that you can build. Now that can be self-assessment activity in itself, and there's many more. There's the 360 interactions and so on. And as you say, one of the key factors we always had at the forefront is making those things as accessible as possible for the people that are creating them, so they don't really need to have the technical knowledge of making accessible resources. By using the tool, they're creating accessible resources.
I think whatever resource you use, the point Marta's just made about identifying why answers are wrong is so important. And I know when I've been doing accessibility and inclusion audits for universities and colleges, sometimes it's been so frustrating to have a go at some of the student quizzes that somebody on a particular course would do, and then just see things that say yes, correct or incorrect, and not have a clue why it's correct or incorrect. So that is something really important. And the other point that Marta makes is sometimes, in the context of free and open text responses, sometimes they allow you to get students, really able students, to give you completely left field answers, which actually deserve the extra marks. So it makes marking more difficult than a tick box, but those two things together are well worth considering.
I'd like to jump in and say hi to Phil with his questions via SMS, where I used to be the SMS queen in the day when I was working in further education. That's how we started self-test quizzes, actually. Before things like Mentimeter came along, tutors were using SMS in classrooms to try and stimulate students' participation that way. So really good to know. But yeah, one way I think questioning can develop, based on building on what Alistair was saying there, is the way I foresee tools developing when we're talking about novel approaches or new ways of developing. I don't want to see another quizzing tool that looks prettier. I want more functionality. And by more functionality, I want quizzes that allow me to go say to the student, pick your choice and then support your answer. So it's both a multiple choice and an open-ended response at the same time. So, here's a multiple choice. I'm going to pick this as my answer because, and then you have to type an open answer. So I'd be looking for, slightly more powerful tools to help us kind of delve deeper into the logic and thinking, so that we can help students a bit more. Because I recall, I often do this. If I do a multiple choice quiz and I've picked the wrong answer, even though I know that's the wrong answer, I tend to remember what I picked and I don't remember what the correct answer is. I don't learn from quizzes as effectively as I should. Don't know if anyone else has got a reply to that.
I think it's worth saying that this session has a small amount of overlap with our session on student self-assessment. Sorry, not self-assessment. Assessing students. It's later on in the program, and that's got some really nice examples of different ways you can test student understanding. You know, going beyond the simple multiple choice, and there's some really nice models of how to give people different ways of being able to select questions or select justifications, but that's something for a later session. But just remember that some of that information can be pulled back into designing your self-assessment quizzes. I'll see if I can find a link for the later one while we're probably time to do the final roundup.
Nearly, yeah.
The
Maybe we
what
can
one?
continue after this,
Yeah.
Natalie, if you can hang around after we stop our recording and tell us a little bit more about PeerWise, and also this idea of confidence levels in your answer. That's another aspect of mastery learning, isn't it? Being able to support and say, I'm 100% confident that is the correct answer, or I'm 25% confident, I'm guessing, basically.
Phil made a nice point there about choose your own adventure, which was, you know, even before we were doing these things online, that was a great book format.
Yes.
To actually have some agency in your routes and follow things through. As we are coming to an end, I just want to quickly mention to our speakers that you will get a future teacher badge. It's in the post, in the email. It'll come to you shortly, just as a way of recognizing your contribution to our session today. So thank you very much for that.
And a reminder that what we usually ask people to do before they leave is to just share one thing, one you know, in detail, one thing that you will do as a result of what you've seen and discussed today.
I think it's probably important to say, as we've sort of skipped over quite a few different tools, that in fact, as a practitioner, it's good to know more than one tool, because as Lillian points out, often you haven't got quite the functionality you want in the tool that's recommended. So getting to know different tools and finding their strengths and weaknesses, and then trying to keep up with the various changes they make as they go along, is just useful. It just increases your familiarity with the technologies and helps you find something that's suitable for a specific context.
Can I check with Isam? Isam, I love what you did with the assignments in Teams. Is that in everybody's Teams, or is that a special thing you have to get set up?
So what I showed you was the educational version of
Okay.
Microsoft Teams.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's not in the corporate version now.
Right. So I won't find it on mine.
No, unless you have a .ac.uk account, and then you can get the A1 license for free.
Okay.
But happy to come back at any time, Alistair, and do a deep dive on Microsoft Teams assignments if you like.
That could be great, and I'm sure there'll be people that will be interested in that. I'll pass that on if we get people asking.
That's all brilliant. I'm going to stop the recording here.